this passenger headlight, which is still shorting out when I turn on the high beams, and I think I figured out why. So I had my aha moment, but it's kind of a bullshit moment, and I'll explain why. So when I took it off, here's how I figured out the problem. I had my continuity tester, and I knew which of these prongs, the high beam prong, I knew which of these prongs was the high beam prong. And so as I disassembled it, I would keep checking continuity from this prong to the housing of this light. Now, continuity is when basically the high beam wire is somehow in contact with this, which it shouldn't be. You have your sealed light, it's got cooling fins in the back, these wires come out, they're carbonated rubber, they're insulated, and then they end at these plugs. So somehow this plug, the wire that runs from it, is touching this housing. That's continuity. So that can only happen in a couple different places. Before I thought it was this wire, which had somehow been shredded, even though it didn't look like it was that bad. I put electrical tape around it just to be safe, so I was pretty confident that was not the problem. Okay, we could rule that out. We know it wasn't the plug itself because that was outside of the housing. We could rule that out, which left this little rim that fit around it and held it into the housing. Somehow, the light was going through, high beam wire was going through this rim. Maybe it was compressing it, I don't know, but then it was going through the rim into the housing. Or the back of this assembly, these cooling fins, were touching the housing. So, process of elimination, as I took it apart, I kept checking continuity as I went. Do I still have it? Do I not have it? I tried wiggling the wire. That didn't seem to affect it, so we knew that that probably wasn't the wire. Maybe if it had been butting up against one of the sharp edges in here that we taped up a moment ago. So as I loosen this, connection, I take it off, we still had our grounding issue. So we know that this was not the problem. At that point, we just had the light sitting in this housing, and it was still grounding out. We still had continuity from the high beam circuit to this housing. So the only thing left was that somehow it was leaking through current, or the circuit was leaking through this this back part, which is set up to have these cooling fins. I thought this may have been plastic, but it is a kind of metal, and it's like painted in something. It's not quite powder coated. But what I found is, in some places, this paint is chipped away. And so when it seats in the housing, the parts where the paint is chipped away from me sort of pressing up against it or just kind of handling the thing, has completed the circuit. And so there's places here that where the paint is chipped off and exposed the metal, which I've checked, and definitely have continuity between this high beam prong and this housing. So this is the same circuit in the light. So, aha, cool. What's weird about it is I don't know why this thing would be built in such a way where the outer assembly would be in the high beam circuit. Usually when you have a housing like this, it's ground. In case something like this happens, someone touches it, it doesn't have high voltage on it, it's the same as ground. This is how most electronics are. The surface of your stereo at home, if it's made of metal, is grounded. So it's an odd design choice, one. Two, I mean, we see the brittleness of this design choice, where you scrape away a bit of this paint, which is a reasonable thing to wear, and then like the whole thing will crap out. And this is not unique to the way I've mounted this. I mean, if this mounts into any metal housing, then you would immediately have a grounding issue. So I don't know if these things are assuming, these are for a Jeep, Wrangler, I guess. I don't know if those housings are made of plastic and so it isn't a problem. It's not how I would have done it. It's not how most people do it. So I don't know what they were thinking when they made this. But that's not our problem. Our problem is how do we fix this? So we'll get you in for a closer look at these wear points, but there's several of them around the edges where this thing can make contact with that metal. So we're gonna do a couple of things. First, I am going to hit this with some spray paint. So we cover up these bits of exposed metal. That's not a great way to insulate things. I don't recommend this at home. But I'm not sure what else to do. That's how they did it originally. So we'll hit it with a little bit of that, form some kind of protective layer. And in addition, I'm going to come back in here and put electrical tape around this whole thing in case the paint rubs off or whatever. It's not going to connect. That's not a great long-term solution because over time, and granted it's a long time, but over time the adhesive on this tape will wear off and it'll kind of fall out and expose us to the same problem. There's also some of these sharp edges here. I don't know how the tape's going to sit around that, and there's these detents that we have to respect so these little tabs can fit into these detents. But it'll give us some protection. Let's get some paint set up and our tape going and get this thing insulated and put back together. Okay, we've got you in here for this close-up. This housing, and you can see where this paint has chipped off there. And it's pretty slight, and this paint or whatever it is not a very thick coat. But that's all that's standing in between this high beam circuit and the great outdoors. You can see elsewhere it's kind of rubbed off here. This is one of these tabs that fits into one of those detents in the housing. There as well. Basically any of these surfaces that contact the housing, you know, if you're kind of fitting this thing in here and shimming it around a bit, eventually this wears off. I didn't think I was being too rough with it, but maybe I was. So I want to see if I might just use tape on that. I'm not sure what I'll do, because this could contact the that chrome ring that holds it in. Yeah, alright, so not a lot of things to clean up, but you can see it's more than just one or two spots here that we have to worry about. There's a bunch of possible contact areas. So that's why we're gonna paint this and tape up the housing itself to give us a little extra protection. Alright, let's get to it. We're back, and we had a couple of changes to the plan. Originally I said I was going to hit this light with a couple coats of paint. I did do that, but what I did differently is I ended up painting the inside of this housing. Paint is an insulator, which is why we painted this, but I figured why not also just hit this with I ended up putting on a couple coats of paint everywhere, just in case something happens. There's an area that I didn't mark off, it rubs a bit, it gives us a little extra protection. But I also put electrical tape over some key touch points. There are these little channels here where these little tabs kind of seat in. That's where we had a lot of rubbing off. So a little bit of electrical tape, more than insulating it, it's softer. The vinyl has a bit of cushion to it, and so hopefully that's enough as this light is kind of compressed into the housing from this metal ring that holds it in. It won't grind against it as hard. That grinding motion could grind some of the paint off, and then we'd be back where we started. But ideally, with a little bit of this padding in the way, it should stay on. It'll kind of keep it in place. So I ended up putting electrical tape in a couple of other hot spots. There are these raised metal, I don't know, pieces, other little brackets that help hold the assembly together, that has some sharp edges on them. Also where these springs come over, and there's sort of the wiry end of the spring here, that's a little sharp. So I ended up just putting some tape over all of it. Not a lot, but again, one layer is enough to take the sharp edge off and give it a little padding. So if it does rub, then hopefully our insulation will stay in place. We won't have any more grounding problems. So I feel pretty good about this, and I'm not sure what else to do. So we're gonna put this back together and get it back on the truck and see if it solved our problem. Here we are, back you know where. So we've taped up the headlight in a lot of places. We've jiggled it. I think we fixed our continuity, but who knows? So let's see how this goes. I got my fuse back in. I got my battery hooked up. Ignition's on. Power. Here goes. Oh, wait! I saw it light up in the mirror, in the window across the street, and then it disappeared. Now it's gone. Oh, now everything's on. And something's freaking out. Ooh, this is causing some kind of oscillations in my circuit. Okay, so I think that's the high beams. This is low beams. So, some success. Let's go have a look. So we've identified the problem with our low beams not turning on, which is that our power comes in here in this red wire. And from here it jumps down to this, which goes to the high beam switch to power the high beams, and it also comes off here to power the low beams. So this is always on. Yes, this always has power when the lights are on. So this comes up here to our low beams. This is the low beam mount down here. Let's move this. This is where power comes in, and then this is where the low beam goes out to the headlights. And then in the back here, let's see, in the back here with this red wire, This jumper's over here to the halo lights. So I've checked continuity, and I do not have continuity for my headlight jumper wire coming down here to 12 volts. I know I have 12 volts at this terminal, but it's not making it up to the low beams. So I probably crimped something wrongly here at these ends. So I'm going to take that off and fix it and try it again. What an adventure. This is how it goes with this thing. Anytime you think, I'm almost there, I've got it, it's gonna be simple. I'm pretty good with electronics. Something happens that makes it a lot more complicated than you think it's gonna be. But, a project like this, exercise in patience. There it goes again. Well, whatever, we're close enough. It's a minor thing at this point. So thanks for joining us. Please come back next time. Hit the like icon and subscribe if you want to. See me work on more of these projects. The truck is nearly done, but there's still a handful of things to knock out, including the brake lights and of course these headlights. So stay tuned and see you next time.